When I was a little girl, I was always reading, and I'm convinced now that that was the key to me becoming a writer. I was a child that never felt that she fitted in, so I was always happiest buried in books. And I remember when I was in school, I would pray for rain, because on breaks we were allowed to sit in the library, and I'd go and curl up in one of these wonderful beanbags and just lose myself in a book. And I'm convinced that that's how I developed my love of words. And writing was something that I never really planned to do. I always thought I'd go to art school and become an artist of some kind. And I ended up falling into journalism, and I was a journalist for a few years. And then at about 27, I decided to write a novel. And incredibly naively, I left the Daily Express and gave myself 3 months to write a novel and get a publishing deal, which with hindsight was insanity, but I did it. Within 3 months I did have a publishing deal, and there was a bidding war for my first book, Straight Talking, and the rest has been, pretty easy. I think that I was always a pretty rubbish journalist. The bit that I liked about journalism was not getting the story, but it was playing with the words and writing the actual stories. And writing has always come very easily to me. It was a huge gamble to leave my job, but I have always trusted that in the work environment things will come up, and I've always been incredibly lucky in work. And so it never really occurred to me that I wouldn't get a publishing deal. I didn't think it would be a big one, and I didn't think that I'd have a string of bestsellers and all the rest of it, but I certainly thought I'll have my little publishing deal and get my book out. When I started writing, my real inspiration behind the idea for my first novel came from Nick Hornby's book High Fidelity. And this book came out and garnered a huge amount of publicity, and it was really a book that seemed to speak to every single 30-something man that I came across. And I remember at the time thinking, well, no one's done this for women. And of course, little did I know that Helen Fielding was there, busy writing Bridget Jones. And I did know that I had a group of girlfriends, and we all were having basically the same relationships with the same sorts of men. And I hadn't read about it anywhere. I hadn't picked up a book that had documented this. And so I decided to sit down and write our lives in Straight Talking. So the media, I guess, seized it because, of course, Bridget Jones's Diary came out, and I think 3 or 4 months later, Straight Talking came out. And there were another couple of books that came out at the same time, and they suddenly coined a term for it and said this is the new wave in fiction and capturing the zeitgeist, and they called it chick lit, which, literature for chicks. And it sparked a huge movement in literature that for 12 years people have been waiting for it to die. I keep picking up newspapers and they say it's the death of chick lit, everybody's had enough, and actually it still seems to be going strong, but I think it's morphed and changed along the way. And certainly I am not writing the same sorts of things that I was. When I started, my books were, about single 30-somethings living in the city looking for Mr. Right. And now, 12 years on, I've been married, I've had 4 children, I've been divorced, I found love again. I've crossed the pond. I live in America, so I feel like I've lived many, many different lifetimes, and I'm certainly not writing about young single women anymore. And in fact, in The Beach House, which is my new hardback, my female protagonist is a 65-year-old woman, and there isn't a designer label or handbag in sight. I think people would be very hard-pressed to apply the chick lit label. Having said that, I'm incredibly proud at having been part of a movement that was so huge. And I don't think it's going anywhere, and nor do I think that there's anything shameful about being a chick lit author. I always compare it to the sort of filmic equivalent of a romantic comedy. I think there's room in this world for everything.